Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. I'm looking forward to a great conversation today.
I am so excited that you're here. You and I have been corresponding online for a while. We did have one conversation together where we got to know each other. And I think just realized that you've got a pretty cool story to tell, both you personally, as well as what you're doing with your company. So it just made sense for us to get together today. So I'm so excited that we were able to do this because I know you've been a very busy person these last several weeks. So I'm really
Yes,
excited. I'm excited you get a little break in your calendar and your diary so we could have this conversation. But
thanks
folks,
so much.
yeah, welcome to the show, please, from the Recursive, Kristiana Kuneva. And Kristiana, I am so excited, like I said, to talk to you. As you know, this is a podcast that's dedicated to women leaders, women in technology, women sort of breaking barriers. So what I would love to start with is a little bit about you, the woman, the executive, and then of course everything that we're going to talk about as it relates to storytelling. I'm fascinated about storytelling. It's something that we always advise folks. You have to have a good story. What's your story? But let's start with your story first, Kristiana. Would you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Yeah, thank you so much, Richard. You pretty much did a really good introduction, but I am Kristiana. I was born in Bulgaria. I've been doing a lot of work, a lot of studying in Western Europe.
Mhm.
If you ask me to describe myself, this might be a little difficult. I've always found this to be difficult, but I know one thing for sure, that in the past 10 years of my life, I tried to be more of a critical thinker,
Nice.
more of a person who cherishes and develops his passion for social justice, because
Mm,
that's been with me for years now.
mm,
And maybe that's how I chose my academic background, to not be in storytelling, but to
mm,
be in international affairs, in diplomacy, in
mm.
human rights protection. But then one thing led to another. I've worked with many NGOs, with many national institutions, EU institutions. And when COVID happened,
Mm,
actually, that in a way transformed my professional life as well.
mm.
And it made me search for some professional development, be
Sure.
it online or in person. But that's how I came to do projects with startups
Mm,
that were dealing with the issue of human rights protection for minority groups, especially during COVID. That opened my way towards technology. And a few months later, I found the Recursive. With them, I've been for the past 3 years.
nice.
And I've dived deeper into the world of tech, of innovation in Central and Eastern Europe, precisely because that's the region we're covering. And my thing that I found for myself, that my secret power is in building sustainable relationships with people,
Lovely.
and in a sense to communicate in a way to find synergies that work both for us and for the person on the other side of the spectrum. And this is what I'm doing today. I am heading the business development department of the Recursive, and I'm trying to build sustainable partnerships and expand our mission further.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So much there. I just learned so much about you in 20 seconds that I didn't know coming into
Did you?
this conversation. I mean, that's outstanding. I spoke with a woman entrepreneur last week, and she said her superpower is authenticity. I love that you said that your superpower is building sustainable relationships. 30 years ago, when I was at university, I studied Central European studies, Slavic studies, Russian. So I think we have to do a whole nother conversation about your previous your previous life. It's not surprising, knowing where you hail from, that you were so focused on social justice and the
Yeah.
importance associated with equity and all of those things. So I'm happy that you've ended up where you are, because I can imagine that you bring this very unique perspective, this very sort of like, where you came from perspective, as well as your focus on sustainability. I'm sure that serves you well in your current capacity. That's great.
I mean, I personally believe that we need to look for the sustainable element in
Mhm.
everything we do, in personal, in professional life. So that's what I'm trying to do in both aspects.
That's amazing. I love this concept, Kristiana, of storytelling and storytelling as a growth tool. A lot of the women that listen to the show are trying to grow their ventures, right? They have startups. They're in that cycle of what's my growth loop? How do I grow? And I know that a lot of them do struggle with telling an authentic story, a story that even they themselves believe because they have imposter syndrome or other things that they don't believe. So let's talk about storytelling in the context of business, Kristiana. What does that mean?
Great question to start with. First of all, everyone loves a good story, but not every story is a good story. So where actually professional seasoned storytellers come in place and do the magic. But this takes years of expertise, years of practice, of experience in different sectors, I would say. But having a good business idea is vital. Having a good business plan to like a well-structured, well-paced business plan is also like a key element of building your business. But every good business idea will remain just an idea if it's not packaged right, right? In a sense that marketing techniques are very important, like to sell your product, to move forward, but what's inside, the essence, the substance can make a huge difference.
Right.
And the way it's narrated and the way it actually gets to the target audience. So that's why we have trained ourselves in presenting the given tech product or solution. We are the company that we all work with in a language that could be easy to understand and digest by the audience. It aims itself to sell itself too. So usually when we start working with a customer, a given company, we will first explore what makes their brand unique, like what their key values are, key brand values. What makes the brand authentic? Here comes this magic word, authenticity. This is very important because the more authentic and true to value your story is, the more it will, it will connect with the audience, and it will sell itself in a better way. So as I said, we go through this process of identifying what the company stands for, what the key values are, who the key customers are, and what their current needs are. Also, we try to build this, strategy, how we could communicate with them in a meaningful way so they feel heard and they, they know what channels to use so their story can get out there and get to their target audiences in their target markets. So the work starts way before the story comes out.
Even begins, yeah.
And in order for the final product to be true to value and show consistency over time, you need to go through this process and build it up way towards the top. And maybe one last thing to mention, like the outcome of this whole process of value identification, communication, strategizing, is the creation of a more cohesive brand identity that resonates with target audiences, that strengthens even team alignment, internal team alignment. So when the moment comes for big business decisions to be made by the A team of the company, they will know how to approach them, and they will know how to communicate the brand efficiently, again, to be it customers, investors, partners. And good public relations with well-established top-tier journalists and outlets are vital for sure. This way you can get the story right there on the spotlight. Credibility of publishing sources can do miracles for sure. And once you're in Bloomberg, once you're in TechCrunch, for example, you're everywhere. You're the next big thing. But again, sustainability of relations over years and experience is what drives our work, and we see real results.
There's so many points that you just made, Kristiana, that I want to double down on and ask you more about. But I think the one that stuck out to me the most in what you just said, having experienced this myself in my own career, having been in the C-suite in my own career, is the internal storytelling, right? Is that you have to tell the right story internally so that your own people even buy into that become, inspired by it, want to believe it connects with them and their value. I think that is something that is often overlooked, is that there's this focus on the external story. And of course, it's really important to tell the external story. Like you said, find those connections, find those, the people that it resonates with, they can identify with it, but internally as well. Right. As you move sort of from startup to enterprise, that internal story is really important too.
Yeah, for sure. And there are a lot of differences when we work, for example, with startups, when we work with scale-ups, like bigger companies, or even enterprises. Like the way we approach the work with them differs.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Kristiana, as you think about regionality here, you travel all over the world as a result of your work, and you've seen the differences in how people value both public relations and storytelling across Central Europe, Western Europe, and even here in the United States. Can you just sort of help us understand how those values differ across those geographies?
Yeah, by values, I definitely can speak about differences of how we approach the markets, like how the markets function in reality.
Sure.
Of course, I can speak more about the European market because, like, most of my experience is coming from here.
Sure.
But with years, with the work, with the client work, we have gathered useful insights about the US market as well, and we see differences. And what I can say is that these differences, the reasons they are that there are differences, are interconnected and split in several groups. So maybe I just can go like in a few groups. I can just explain what, in my opinion, differs.
Perfect.
But even when we start, because we talked about cultural sensitivities in the beginning of our conversation about Central Europe, about Western Europe,
Sure.
even those were, but starting with cultural differences. Like, for example, many European countries, especially those in Central, Eastern Europe, they tend to value more modesty. For them, like self-promotion or aggressive marketing can be viewed as inauthentic, for example. Whereas the US, in my opinion, it's like this marketing, self-promotion is often celebrated as visionary, as confident, as, like you're promoting yourself so you can go even higher in your career or in your business value. And maybe risk aversion also relates to that, because European cultures, especially in the tech industry, can be more risk averse, favoring slow, steady growth over rapid expansion or rapid launches. But marketing and PR are sometimes seen as risky expenditures that do not always deliver results like in the next minute. Like, very often they deliver intangible results that cannot be seen even for years ahead. But, that's what matters. We need to realize that even it's a matter of reputation. Even if we don't see results like next month or even 3 months afterwards, this building up, like being in the media, creating narratives about your product, about your journey, this will pay off eventually, because people will know you will build credibility, and you will succeed in, like capturing different markets. But even from the investment side, what I can say is that US VCs generally push companies to grow fast and build strong brand awareness from the early stages of the company. And PR is often, and marketing are often seen as a tool to fuel this growth over the years. While in Europe, VCs may focus more in the beginning on technical product market fit or profitability earlier in the development of the company. So that differs a lot in how VCs and investors approach this need for PR and for marketing. And of course, maybe the startup maturity. European startups often operate longer under the radar, seeking to prove, like product stability before they go and use PR techniques. But in contrast, US startups often invest in getting the story out there from day one. And maybe it works better, but on the US market, not that much in the European market, because the mindset is different.
I feel this saying that we have, right? The fake it till you make it sort of saying, and not to oversimplify it all, the very eloquent answer that you just gave. But I feel here in the US, this startup mentality is, we don't have product market fit yet, but we're going to go out there and tell a story, and we're going to go out there and fake it until we make it. European, I really appreciate what you said, Kristiana, about really focusing on the product market fit, really focusing on the technical stability, operating under the radar, because culturally that is what's more, aligned, right, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. And even when we talk about the market size, like the US is a large homogeneous market overall. Right. Marketing investment has a higher ROI because messaging doesn't get that localized. Sure. While in European countries, for example, like every company in a way must justify marketing efforts per market they want to enter, just because the markets are that fragmented that they would probably need a bit, like tailored strategies if they want to enter the Central and Eastern European market or Western market. Even in the Western European market, the UK market differs from the German market, differs from the French market. So you spend more resources, even financial resources, to actually get this coverage that you're hopeful to get results from.
I think that's another really important point you just made about the homogenous sort of US market. And even though, yeah, things can slightly differ between the Northeast where I live, or, the Southwest part of the country, or the Western or the Southeast. And of course, you can drive across the entire country and travel through all these states, and you see some nuances and some differences. But to your point, it's highly homogenized. You go to Europe, you can drive across Europe or rail across Europe, but you're crossing all these countries that have unique cultural characteristics, their own language, their own traditions. I think that's a point that is very important that you made.
Yeah, even when you're in the same region in Europe, like you pass a given country's borders, and you meet a whole new variety of historical elements, cultural sensitivities, traditions that during the time they have formed the way people in this country have perceived business, the business sector, the tech sector, which is quite newly developed. So it makes a difference.
I could, speaking from my own experience, having worked in Spain, Barcelona is different than Valencia, is different than Madrid. Everything from the language to, there's so many nuances, right? Absolutely.
Yes, this is even truer for European countries. When you go inside a country, they have different regions inside the country that you need to know the sensitivities of, so you know how to navigate market expansion.
Really important points, Kristiana. Let's talk about the recursive. We haven't even really defined what the recursive is. Tell us a little bit about the Recursive, the company, the storytelling studio, and kind of what you're all about there.
Yeah, would love to.
Yeah.
So the Recursive, this is one of the leading media outlets for tech and innovation in Central and Eastern Europe, this specific region, as I already mentioned. We tell the success stories of the numerous innovators, promising founders, investors in the region, and of course, entrepreneurs. We, in a way, unite the ecosystem because the tech sector in Central and Eastern Europe has been rapidly developing in the past 10 to 15 years, and we see like even faster pace now. So we decided, why not help the whole region, the region's potential to grow even further. So that's how the Recursive was born, to actually share the success stories for innovation and technology first in Eastern Europe, then we spread our impact and influence over Central Europe as well. So I would just list the countries down: Bulgaria, Greece, Romania, but then the Western Balkans, and then from Central Europe, Czech Republic, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, and Slovenia as well.
Wow.
So this is the Recursive. We started in 2021, just 4 years ago, and have organically reached more than 70 million people worldwide. And we have achieved 2.3 million, I just know the statistics, 2.3 million story views in general. And additionally, senior representatives from one of the biggest corporations or the biggest tech companies around the world, like Google for startups, for example, Amazon, Nvidia, Oracle, MasterCard. They have partnered with us in one way or another if they wanted to raise some awareness about what they do in this part of Europe, or if they wanted to find some market fit in this precise region. And in 2023, just 2 years ago, we launched our storytelling studio, which is our PR agency that helps companies from Central and Eastern Europe to enter new markets based on their needs, based on their goals. And we do that with a variety of services, from developing go-to-market strategies and brand identity workshops to developing strategic communication strategies, even content creation for their own channels so they can position themselves out there as well to create reputation as leaders in what they do. And also in the past few years, we have also gathered this expertise to position promising founders and investors on stage of the biggest tech conferences across Europe, and to give them access to many investors, to many partners, like top tier partners, and also to give them the possibility to build their top leadership brand.
First of all, I'm not surprised that you know the statistics right off the top of your head, because you are in charge of commercial efforts. So I know that's really important as you tell the story of the Recursive, right? As I was listening to you, I was thinking about my own experience, Kristiana, right?
Yep.
And my pre-COVID company that I had in Kyiv, and we were really kind of focused in two areas. One was financial tech, fintech, and the other was shipping and logistics. And I noticed that the Recursive, you focus on so many different verticals and so many different industries. And I know we were even challenged just to focus on how we would explain our brand to the financial market versus the shipping and logistics market. And we needed a lot of help with that. And, we would have definitely loved to have been partnered with the Recursive at that time.
Now you know about us.
Now we know. How do you folks cut across, I guess, Kristiana, so many different industries and all that expertise? How do you do that?
Yeah. So in our team, we have people who have had significant experience in different verticals. So we give them the chance to actually build up on these skills and, in a way, become thought leaders or masters in this very specific vertical and continue getting exposure to the top companies building solutions in this vertical. But we also have this internal culture of learning new skills, getting to meet people who open our way to find out more about other sectors, because there are so many companies, so many sectors, so many new things happening every step of
Everywhere.
the time.
Yep.
Everywhere. So it makes it, because we know how to write stories, because we know we know the cultural and market sensitivities of this specific region, which gives a lot of push to our storytelling expertise. But because we know that, and because we know how to write for tech audiences, this makes it much easier when we come across a newly founded startup or newly crafted solution. We know how to approach it, and then when we have the necessary information of what they do, how they do it, based on the strategy we have developed, we can get closer to them and get to know their message, and then to spread it across different markets.
I'm always fascinated by marketing professionals and executives and experts like yourself, where you kind of are very deliberate in being specific about impressions versus views versus downloads versus it's all so fascinating to me, because all of that mixes together into really the reach overall of what you're doing, right? It's
I mean, this is what counts at the end, how many people have downloaded it, how many people this story got to. Again, this is important because this is how to measure, metrics. But what's more important is what's left afterwards, the reputation you build, the credibility you build. So you can pay, you can build yourself as a leader in what you do, and people trust you over time.
As you think about this, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier, Kristiana, about sort of the innovation ecosystem that has started to develop throughout Central and Eastern Europe. It's very impressive what has happened over the last 10 to 15 years. And storytelling is really so key to that. Is the region aligned with that, or are you still educating them, I guess, on that? Or are they coming to realize that now and reaching out and wanting to work with you?
Yeah, so as we've already touched upon, I can say that Central and Eastern Europe startup system is currently valued of 243 billion euro
Wow.
for this was estimated in the first quarter of 2025, with approximately 3,800 startups and to over 200, almost 300 scale-ups.
Wow.
These are statistics that I know for now.
Hmm.
But as we already mentioned as well, by telling the stories of CE founders and investors, by connecting the community, even with the diaspora and the CE communities living abroad, we create that bridge
Mhm.
that gives company, like the confidence that, okay, one person has done that and has achieved that, I
Mhm.
can do it as well. So
Mm.
by connecting these dots, by building these bridges, we give them actually access to what's out there in Western Europe, in the West, or some other markets, and they start
Mhm.
getting the feeling that if they invest in PR, if they invest in storytelling, in marketing, their name can be out there and they can position themselves as brand, like as thought leaders, and they can influence the brand awareness.
You mentioned the diaspora and,
Yeah.
an expansion into the US markets. Um, I'm curious about your own plans from the Recursive's perspective as you think about, you've got this really great story and toehold that you're telling throughout Central and Eastern Europe. As you guys move into Western Europe, the US, what are your plans for impact beyond the region?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we work closely with outlets,
Yeah.
agencies, with conference organizers from other regions, and our services are quite standard, but they can
Mhm.
be adapted to the needs of every company who wants to scale and
Yeah.
grow. So bonus comes from our extensive focus on Central and Eastern Europe because, as I mentioned, we know pretty much how the market functions, and we can help companies enter the given country market and establish real presence. And with time, we get to know what other markets look like,
Mhm.
so we can, like you can approach them in a similar way. But the more the tech sector in the region develops, the more companies want to enter new markets,
Right.
mostly westwards. So we follow the trend and we
Hmm.
strive to deliver maximum value. One interesting initiative that we've been working on for the past 2 years, I would say, since the end of 2023, this is Breaking Grounds, is a national initiative, the first public-private initiative in Bulgaria that actually aims to bring more awareness about the development of the tech sector in Bulgaria. So that's why we lead delegations of startup founders, of investors, of entrepreneurs to the major tech conferences across Europe, where they have a chance to go on stage, to present their solution, to pitch in front of investors, to get to get hold of the people they
Mhm.
are really targeting. And
Mhm.
in the same way, we present what Bulgaria, sometimes what the whole region has in terms of innovation potential. And this is how we grow the technological brand of the region. So we are definitely looking forward to expand that and
Mhm.
to bring delegations even to countries outside of Europe, even to the US as well, so we can establish stronger business relations.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the diaspora who live in Western Europe, the US, on the rest of the markets, they are a very vital link because
Sure.
they can give back to the community with the knowledge they have acquired in this new market, and they can establish some deliver some networking opportunities and connect our region with the right people over there.
I love how complex yet deliberate all of this is that you're explaining. It's so fascinating. Um, Thank you for your time, Christiana. And before we let you go, as you know, um, most of our listeners to this podcast are young women founders. They're trying to figure out what their story is, like I mentioned to you. both their own personal story, their own personal brand, what they're trying to do with their company and how they're moving that company forward. What is the one thing, in your expert opinion, Kristiana, that every founder needs to know about storytelling?
This is a good question. I've been thinking about that in the past years, ever since I joined the sector.
Yeah.
But I would honestly say that in business as well as in relationships, communication is key.
Mhm.
So it's not the key. So we're, as communal creatures, this is our currency. This is how we express our feelings, how we bond. So
Mhm.
it's vital that we communicate in a way that our message gets to the intended receiver the right way.
Mhm.
And crafting a good, true to value story can get a company from level one from level 0 to level 1, and even further. And as in the Recursive, we love to say and repeat, stories shape stories, which is actually a quote taken from Michael Gollis, who
Yeah.
is a very prominent tech advisor. My
Mhm.
personal reading of this is that once you set the tone and fill in the essence, the story will generate even further narratives, and
Mm.
this can potentially create a long-lasting impact, not just for your company, for your business, but for the overall development of the ecosystem that you're part of. And this is a reminder that storytelling is not static; it's dynamic, living, evolving
Yes.
process, and each narrative influences the next one.
Mhm.
And the stories we tell today are the foundation for tomorrow's maybe next groundbreaking idea. So I would like to leave this as a
Yeah.
note.
Yeah, I like this note. And you mentioned we're communal animals and we want to communicate and have community. And one of my favorite mentors said to me a long time ago, because you mentioned currency, and this popped in my head too, Kristiana. He said, our currency of persuasion and our currency of communication are our most important currencies, right? To be able to persuade people to move in a direction that you want them to move in and show them the value of moving in that direction, right?
Yeah,
Very
definitely.
said.
Language, the way we communicate are very powerful tools. So we need to use them
Yep,
for our benefit and for the benefit of the person we partner with.
exactly. Yeah, for the benefit of everyone. Kristiana, you're delightful. I love this conversation. I learned so much in what you've talked to me about
Yes, well,
storytelling. Unlocked so many things for me. Kristiana Kuneva, we can find you at therecursive.com, correct? That's
yes,
that's where the best place to go. Any other important places we should look?
On LinkedIn, again, the Recursive
Yeah,
Storytelling Studio has its own page. You can
perfect.
follow that as well.
Perfect.
And on YouTube, you can find the Recursive podcast where we publish the episodes with some established thought leaders from the region.
Good stuff. All right. We're going to make sure we get all those things linked up on this episode. Kristiana, once again, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for
Oh,
joining us all the way from Bulgaria. And we're so excited to have had you and looking forward to staying in touch.
yes, thank you so much for the opportunity, and let's stay in touch.